Hello and welcome everyone to the Varsity Tutor Star Course series, where tonight our focus is again on college admissions, and we are honored to have the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at UCLA, Gary Clark, here to talk to us about applying to the entire University of California system and, of course, there at UCLA. Now, just a couple quick things before I turn it over to Gary Clark here. One, please keep your questions coming throughout. He's going to kind of stick to the script for a lot of it because everyone has so many questions that relate to their own personal case. But in the last 10 to 15 minutes, I'll interview him with all of your questions. So if you've got questions at any point, don't feel like you have to wait until the end. Type those in. If he doesn't get to them real time, it's because we'll take all of those in an interview format at the end. We also, if you've been to any of these Star Course series classes before or events before, we always do a little bit of a social media contest. So you don't have to take notes, but if you do find anything particularly useful that you want to share with your social network, if you post something you learned tonight to either Instagram or Twitter and tag Varsity Tutors, we'll have the official rules up on a slide at the end of the program. You'll be entered to win a free tutoring session with Varsity Tutors, so we can help out with some of that preparation you're going through. So with all that said, make sure to ask lots of questions, post something you learned to social media, and enjoy all the great information that Gary has for us here. I'm going to turn it over to your teacher for today, Gary Clark.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Welcome, everybody. I am excited to be here with you tonight. Glad to have the opportunity to talk shop a bit about UC admission and what we look for and how we review and read applications. So thanks to all of you for joining us and participating in the program this evening. As Brian mentioned, I have some slides that I'm going to share in a brief presentation that I'll run through, but I will certainly seek to leave plenty of time at the end to answer some of the questions that may come through. So with that, I am going to get my slides up and running here, and off we go. As I mentioned, my name is Gary Clark. I am the Director of Undergraduate Admission at UCLA. I've been in my role here for about 9 years. So I've gotten to know not only UCLA, but I've gotten to know the UC system quite well during that time. Overall, I've been in college admissions for probably 22, 23 years. So I bring some experience from different universities prior to my time at UCLA. But I'm glad that all of you are considering the University of California. As I give my comments tonight, certainly I'm going to try and represent UC broadly and talk about the broader process of evaluating applicants and considering them for admission. My best expertise certainly comes in UCLA and how we do things and how we read apps and make admission decisions. So I will certainly call on that experience a number of different times during my presentation tonight. The other thing I'll share at the beginning, I'm largely going to focus on freshman admission in our conversation this evening. I will allude to transfer admission in a couple of places, but those two are actually quite different processes. So I'm going to focus on freshmen, but certainly at the end, if anybody has questions about transfer admission, happy to answer those as well. UC has a big commitment to transfer students. We actually enroll one new transfer student for every 2 new freshmen each year, both as individual campuses and as a system. So we're really committed to working with students coming out of our California community colleges in the transfer process. But you're here and you're thinking of the University of California, and where do I begin and how do I decide which of these campuses might be a good fit for me? Well, the first thing I would encourage you to do is if you're thinking of any one UC campus, you should be thinking of at least 3 or 4. I really think there's a lot that we share in common. Certainly each of these campuses is distinct and has its own kind of flavor and characteristics, but we share a lot in common. We're all very committed to providing research opportunities for undergraduates that are second to none. We have incredible residential experiences. We have clubs and organizations that students can take advantage of, but it's all backed up by the reputation of an education at the University of California. Certainly one of the best and most well-recognized public systems of higher education in the country. So I would especially put a plug in for now what we have in terms of opportunities to engage with us virtually. One of the very thin silver linings to the pandemic has been that all of us as campuses have really upped our virtual engagement game prior to what we offered 2 years ago. So virtual tours that are live and led by tour guides, virtual info sessions, even opportunities to sit in on classes at some campuses virtually. Like, there are great ways to get to know each of the UC campuses. So I would say, even if you can't get here physically, we'd love to welcome you to campus, but if you can't get here in person, lots of great opportunities to engage with the system on a virtual basis. You can see the map here of just locations and where all the campuses are, but they're each very different and have, like I said, have very different characteristics. You've got, UC Davis, which is in a great college town. You've got Santa Cruz, which is a beautiful campus. You've got Santa Barbara right on the beach. You've got UCLA right in Westwood, Berkeley and downtown Berkeley in the East Bay. UC San Diego, beautiful coastal area. And each of these campuses share a lot of majors in common, but they also have some majors that are distinct and really high performing majors on their individual campuses. So as you're researching the system, be sure that you take the time to get to know what we not only share in common, but what some of those differences between the campuses might be. And so I already talked a little bit about kind of, are you looking for a more urban experience or looking for something a little more rural? Do I want to live on campus? Do I want to be further away from home or close to home? Is some of the majors that I might be interested in available at these campuses? So I think each of these things will help to start to guide your college search and help you understand which of the campuses, multiple, I hope, might meet some of your potential post-secondary goals. So let's dive right in. This is an admission presentation, so let's really talk about the process of applying for admission. For those of you that are seniors or potentially community college students, we are right in the period of application submission. So each year, the UC application opens on August 1st, and you apply for admission for the next fall. So students right now who are seniors are applying for admission for fall 2022 at the UC campuses. The University of California application is its own application. We don't utilize, for example, the Common Application or any other application that you might have heard of out there. It is the University of California application, one app for the whole system. When you fill it out, and we'll talk about filling it out and, and what we're asking you to provide to us, you will click which of the campuses you'd like to apply to. And you can apply to as many as you'd like, but there is a separate application fee for each campus that you apply to. If you qualify for a fee waiver, you can actually apply to up to 4 campuses utilizing that fee waiver. And I would encourage any student in that situation to take advantage of all 4 of those campuses. Don't leave any on the table. If you have the opportunity to receive a fee waiver and you can apply to up to 4, take advantage of that and really find the 4 that you think best fit what you might be looking for in a college experience. Once you click submit on the application, and I'll do a little bit of myth busting in this presentation. I think there's a perception that once you click submit that somehow we're all sharing information and that I'm peeking over the fence at UCLA to see what's happening over at Berkeley or one of the other campuses. That is absolutely not the case. When you submit the application, it actually goes to the UC Office of the President up in Oakland, and they then farm the data out to the campuses to which the student applied. So I don't know if you've applied to another UC campus. To be honest, I don't care. What I'm focused on once you click submit on that application is if you've applied to UCLA, what kind of fit do we think you're going to be for our campus? That's it. I'm not looking at where else you've applied or really care where else you might be interested in. We're squarely focused on your fit with UCLA and reading your application with that context in mind. We do not offer any kind of early program at the UC. So you might have heard of early decision or early action. The University of California doesn't offer any kind of early program like that. So you apply during this November filing period. And when you click submit on the application, doesn't have any bearing on your likelihood of being admitted or when you might receive your admission decision. So for those of you that are in that period of potentially applying now, don't feel like I got to get it in right away. As long as you apply by the deadline, you're good. Now, the obvious piece of advice here is please don't wait until the evening of November 30th at 11:59 p.m. when all kinds of crazy things can happen. Your laptop dies, the internet goes out. We have about that much sympathy the day after the deadline for people that miss the deadline because this does not sneak up on anybody. So give yourself some time, make sure you're comfortable before you click submit on the application, but don't put it off until the last minute to make sure that you don't find yourself in that position. Now, in terms of when you will get your admission decision, that really does vary by campus. You're not going to hear from all campuses at the same time. Some campuses may release some decisions as early as early February. My campus, for example, we release all of our freshman admission decisions on the same day at the same time. So it's always in late March, it's always on a Friday, it's always after 5 p.m. And we do that so that you can get the decision, hopefully in the privacy of your own home and not in the middle of the lunchroom at school or something like that. So, each campus, don't think if I'm hearing from one campus but not hearing from another that I need to be worried. We all kind of notify students of their admission decisions on slightly different timelines. So, don't panic if you're hearing from one or a couple, but not hearing for all. You'll hear from everybody by April 1st with a final decision. So just keep that in mind. So let's talk about, like I said, I'm going to focus on first year admission and certainly if some questions come up about transfer admission, happy to go into that a bit, but I'm going to focus most of my comments here on the freshman process. So for those of you that are here in California, the A through G requirements are something that I think is probably very familiar to you. These are the courses that a student must complete in high school to be eligible for admission to the University of California. You have to meet certain thresholds to be eligible for admission to the University of California, one of which is meeting the A through G admission requirements with a C or better. So these are, for those of you that are outside of California or not familiar with A through G, this is basically your traditional college prep curriculum. So if you're attending school, wherever you're attending school, and you're following the general recommended college prep curriculum, you're going to be in good shape to apply for and be eligible and potentially be competitive for admission to the University of California. These are just the different things, the different subject areas that our faculty feel are an important foundation for a student before they come into the University of California and start in their first year. And again, if you scan through these are all very familiar subjects. There's nothing here that I think is really going to be too surprising to anybody. And I want to emphasize this point, and you're going to hear me say this a little bit later as well. These are minimum requirements. Doesn't mean that if you complete these, you're going to be admitted. Our students at each of these campuses need to be competitive to be admitted. And what that means is that you're really not only completing these requirements, but in some cases, even surpassing these requirements and performing at a high level. So don't think just because you've gotten to a place of completing one of the A through G that there isn't potentially some more that you can do. Now, I'm not saying you got to go out and double the number in all of these, but I don't want a student to think that, okay, well, I took my third year of math in junior year, so maybe I'm not going to take math in my senior year. Well, I think, you could do that and you might be admitted to a campus, but you're going to make yourself much more competitive if you really push your curriculum a little bit and take some of those rigorous classes available to you in your high school setting and really kind of push in some of these subject areas to really take things that you're excited about. There are certainly certain subjects I'm sure that really appeal to some of you more than others. Push yourself in those subject areas and really take some challenging courses and kind of push that learning through some of the courses that you're taking in high school. So again, I'm showing here a minimum requirement. To be eligible for admission to the University of California, you have to have a minimum of a 3.0 GPA in California. If you are a non-resident student, if you are from outside of California, you have to have at least a 3.4 UC GPA to be eligible for admission. Again, eligibility is not selection. Just because you're eligible doesn't mean you're going to be selected for admission. So these are the minimum requirements. Now, let me talk about the UC GPA for a second and help you understand exactly what that means, because it's kind of its own unique thing. So first of all, you don't have to input any GPA into the application. What we ask you to do in the UC application is to self-report your entire academic history in high school. We want you to tell us all the classes you've taken, whether those courses are honors, AP, IB, dual enrollment, college classes, whatever the case may be. We want you to self-report that in the application. We do not collect the high school transcript at the point of application. If you are admitted and choose to enroll, then we will collect a final high school transcript, and we do then compare to make sure that what you reported in the application lines up with what we see on that final high school transcript. But we're going to ask you to sit with your transcript and do it that way. Don't try and do this from memory, because we don't want mistakes. We don't want you to say, oh, well, I thought I got this, but maybe that can lead to bad things down the road. So make sure that you have a transcript out and that you're entering the information as you see it listed on your transcript into the UC application. We ask you to tell us about all your classes 9th through 12th, what you have planned to take or what you're currently taking in 12th grade. Now, the UC GPA is based exclusively on sophomore and junior year and those A through G courses that I talked about a minute ago. So the UC GPA does not account for grades in the freshman year and obviously doesn't account for grades in the senior year because you're still taking those classes. So we ask you to report on all of those grades, however, because we want to see kind of your pattern. We want to see like all the courses you've taken, start to finish in high school. And then if there are any patterns in the grades that you've been earning, like is there anything that we should note there in terms of, how you're performing? Are you on an upward swing? Have you stayed consistently strong throughout? Like that helps to give us some information about the trajectory of your academic program. But that helps us to really understand who you are as a student and the types of classes that you've really taken in your high school curriculum. The UC GPA is based just on those sophomore and junior year classes. Now, when we're assessing rigor in high school, there's often questions about how we do that. And I think a lot of questions around, well, how many APs do I need to take to be competitive? Or how many honors or how many IB courses do I need to take to be competitive for admission to the University of California? And the answer is, it depends. It depends on where you go to school and the type of curriculum available to you in that school setting. And I can say this is true of every college that I've ever worked at, we're not trying to draw lines at numbers of APs or IBs or any of that type of thing. What we want to understand is what's available to you in your school setting and to what degree have you taken advantage of some of those rigorous courses, because that's the only way to really do this in a way that makes sense. There are some schools that offer 20, 25 plus APs. There's some schools that offer 0. There's some schools that maybe offer 6 or 8. Some schools may limit the number of APs that you take in a given year, or you can't start taking them until junior year, all kinds of things that can really come into play. We need to understand that context in order to evaluate whether you've really pushed yourself in the academic program available at your school. So I think there's always these kind of horror stories out there of, well, I know students are, applying with, 10, 12 APs and like my school only offers 3 or my school doesn't offer an AP curriculum. That's okay. We're not comparing you to that student at a school that offers, 20 plus APs. We're saying within the context of the opportunities available to you in your school setting, have you taken advantage of those classes and really pushed yourself academically? That's that kind of contextual part of the review process. I think there are perceptions that this is all like formula-based kind of stuff, and it's not. It's not how we've done it. We read holistically. I'll talk about all the things that we consider, but understanding a GPA goes beyond just seeing a number. It's much more important for us to understand what that number represents by the curriculum that the student has attempted in high school. Some of the accommodations we've made related to COVID, certainly we understand the impact of the pandemic. A number of you going back, over a year ago now, a year and a half ago, we're kind of forced into a situation where some of your classes might have been pass, switch to pass fail. And even for those of you in California, I know that there was some ability to even change some courses you had completed previously, potentially to a pass grade. That's fine. We hold students harmless for that. I think that we recognize the impact that the pandemic had on everybody and still is having on all of us and the way we live and make our way, in the communities that we're a part of. But especially going back to the spring and summer of 2020, we recognize that from that point and even through this year, that you didn't have the same kinds of opportunities that you typically have, whether it's activities outside of class, whether it's, support in an academic environment, if you were in a remote situation and, maybe your school, did a great job with remote. I know how tough it was for teachers and counselors and students and everybody to really transition to online learning. And that can be challenging for all involved in that. And so we really are coming to this process and completed this review cycle with, as much grace as we were capable of, really recognizing that the circumstances that everybody experienced over these last 18 months or so have been unprecedented. And we're trying to really bring a human element to this review process and recognize that some of the decisions that you made were kind of forced upon you in some different ways. So just wanted to make that point clear. So I'll spend a few minutes on this because I think this really says a lot about the things that we're considering in our review process. So I've talked a little bit about GPA and kind of the performance in A through G courses and that type of thing. The next point that you see here is specifically for students in California. A number of high schools in California participate in something called eligibility in the local context. The majority of high schools do. And what that basically means is for the University of California, when you fill out the UC application, it will determine based on the information that you input, whether you're in the top 9% of students graduating from that school, looking not only at this cycle, but at a couple previous cycles. And if you are in the top 9%, you're guaranteed admission to the University of California, not necessarily to the campus of your choice, but you're guaranteed admission to UC. And what that means is if you apply to some campuses and maybe ultimately you aren't admitted to the campuses to which you apply, you will get a guaranteed offer of admission to the University of California. And in many cases, likely UC Merced, which is a beautiful campus that has some pretty spectacular programs and new buildings on campus. They would likely be the campus to fulfill that guaranteed offer if you are ELC. And that means that's also something that we can consider in the review process. If we see that a student has achieved eligibility in the local context, that's a factor that we can consider in evaluating a student's application for admission. So this entire slide is entitled Comprehensive Review, and that's really how we describe our process. We use two general terms to describe what we do. Comprehensive review is really the what of our admission process. It's all the different elements that the faculty have said, yes, you can consider those things in evaluating a candidate for admission. Holistic review is really the how. It's the how we take all these different things and put them together in a review process and ultimately determine who we want to recommend for admission to our particular campus. So these are the things that we consider, and I want to be sure you understand how each of them really plays a role. So the UC approved AP and honors, again, goes back to the kind of rigor that I was talking about before, and seeing that a student is doing well and doing well in a rigorous program. So I get this question all the time. Is it better to get a B in an AP class or an A in a regular class? And the somewhat sarcastic answer to that is it's better to get an A in an AP class, because you have to think about how competitive this process has become on many of our campuses. And if you want to be competitive, you need to be a student who's really stepping up to take some of those classes and really perform well in a rigorous high school program with all the context that I shared earlier around that. We do want to see that students are challenging themselves in a rigorous high school program. So I don't want students to so overwhelm their curriculum that they have no balance, that they can't be involved, that they're up until 3 a.m. We want you to push yourself to the point of maybe slight discomfort of having a manageable but potentially heavy workload, because when you get to college, it's going to be similar. It's going to be a heavy workload. You've got to be able to manage that with some things you're doing you might be doing outside of class, but not to the point of like I'm miserable, I'm not happy, I can't do anything that I really enjoy doing. You find that balance. I've always described students at UCLA in that way as being very balanced students who, I think perform well in class, but really get involved and do things that are just fun because they're fun, not because there's not an end to every means. Like you need to sometimes do things just to decompress and really relax and enjoy yourself to really be fully equipped and ready to kind of go after things in an academic setting and perform at a high level. So switching over to the personal achievements part. So we give you space in the UC application to tell us about all the activities and awards and things that you've been involved in high school. And really think about that broadly, because I think sometimes students fall into this trap of thinking it has to be school specific things like clubs or organizations or student government or sports at your school. Like All those things are fine, but also maybe you're active in your faith-based community. Maybe you work part-time. Maybe you take care of a sibling or a family member at home, or you volunteer, like whatever it is that you're interested in doing, whatever it is that you love, tell us about that in the application. I always tell students it's not the length of the resume that matters as much as the depth of commitment to the things that you do that really stands out to us. I think people think they have to have this long resume and that colleges are always looking for well-rounded students who are doing a little bit of everything. Well, not necessarily. I mean, there are plenty of perfectly lopsided students that get admitted to my campus and other UCs. And there's students who have a passion or an interest in one area, or maybe haven't had the ability to do all these different things because they've had commitments at home or working or whatever the case may be. So engagement outside of class comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes. What we're looking for, the reason why colleges ask for this information, the reason why UC asks you to share this in the application, is because we want to know that you're the type of student who's going to come to our campus and be active and engaged both in and outside of the classroom. That you're going to be a good roommate. You're going to be somebody who's excited and taking advantage of all that these experiences have, that these campuses have to offer to you. That you're not somebody who's just going to go to class, go to your dorm room, wake up and do it all over again. We want students who are really going to take advantage of everything that a campus might be able to offer to them. So when you're thinking about sharing that information, don't confine yourself to just thinking about what you're doing in school. Really think broadly about what you spend your time doing, outside of class, and share that with us. And this isn't about checking boxes. This is about, doing things that you love because you love to do them, not because you think it's going to improve your chances of being admitted. We want students who, are passionate about the things that they do, because it just makes a difference. Like, we don't want people going through the motions. We want students who are active and engaged in these things because they really care about them deeply. So, I mean, these things that you see on the right really each speak to those kinds of activities, whether it's research or projects that you've been engaged in, or, whatever kind of circumstances you've had in your life and how you've kind of, taken advantage of opportunities or overcome challenges. Like, all these things really speak to who you are as a student and who you'll be as a citizen in our community. This bottom point, there's a very long web address here. If you just Google UC Comprehensive Review, you'll find a link that describes all of these elements and some more detail that I've been talking about here as well. But this last point that you see on the slide is an important one as well. And that is that we are not considering SAT or ACT in the admission or scholarship review process at the University of California. That started last year. It will extend through at least the fall 2024 application cycle, potentially beyond. Our Board of Regents is making that decision very soon as to what the future of testing looks like at the University of California. But certainly for now, through at least the fall 2024 application cycle, we will not consider SAT or ACTs in the admission process. So we're not optional. You don't get to say, I'd like you to consider my score. We don't consider any score for any applicant in the admission or scholarship review process. So that's something that was fairly new this year. I think it went quite well. I think we're very confident that all these things you see on the screen give us plenty of information to make a well-informed decision about the candidates that we admit and their ability to come to our campus and contribute and be successful in kind of the rigorous environment that we offer on each of our campuses. So even without testing, I think we felt very comfortable. I think there was, again, kind of a perception that, GPA and SAT are kind of the two great pillars of college admission. And if you take one of those away, how on earth are college admission officers going to evaluate candidates without that? Well, I think that implies a perception. I mean, that implies that somehow things were very formulaic, that it was GPA plus SAT equals you're in or you're not. And that's never been the case. That's not how it works at my campus. It certainly has never been that way in the time that I've been here. And I think the other campuses would really concur with that it's all the other things that you see here that contribute to that three-dimensional understanding of who a student is that ultimately leads to the decision that that we might make. Finally, the personal insight questions. So I'll start talking about these. These are kind of our version of the college essay. And they're important and valuable to us because of a couple of things. We do not collect letters of recommendation, and we do not interview students. So the only opportunity we really have, to hear your voice in the application is what you share with us in response to these personal insight questions. Now, there may be certain majors that might ask a student for a letter of rec on a couple of the campuses, or in some cases, a campus that might reach out and ask for a letter of recommendation for some particular, circumstance or reason or something. But 98, 99% of applicants and of the campuses are really not considering letters of recommendation in our holistic review process. So what these then allow us to do is hear the student's voice, to hear about the student from the student. There are 8 questions that are posed to you in the application, and you as a student get to choose which 4 of those you'd like to respond to. And, you got to read through them all and just see which ones really speak to you. It doesn't matter which ones you pick. We have no preference of any one over the other. But there's some, like there's one that talks about, write about kind of your creativity, your creative side. I, as a student, would have skipped right past that. I was not a very creative individual as a young person and still not today. So I would have went right past that question and found another question that I thought was better suited to give me the opportunity to respond in a way that I really felt comfortable with. No more than 350 words in each response. So you really got to kind of get to the point. This is not intended to be like a verbose, like very long-winded English paper that you're submitting for a grade. This is intended to help us get to know you, to really hear you write in your own voice and give us an authentic look at who you are as a person and how you think and who you are as a student. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking at these trying to, like circle misplaced commas or misspelled words. Like, we want it to be well written, obviously. But at the end of it, the question we'll ask is, do we understand and know the student better now than we did before reading this response? So don't get caught up in trying to find something unique. I think sometimes, you got to find a unique story to tell. No, you don't. Like some of the best responses I've read have been about some of the most mundane things that happen in our lives, but they can be impactful and they can say a lot about who we are or how we think, as people. So really just write in a voice you're comfortable in. Don't try and, leave the thesaurus on the shelf. Like, this is not about trying to impress us with vocabulary. Write in the language you're comfortable using, and really just give us that authentic inside look at who you are and how you might contribute to our campus community. So, they're helpful because, again, they're that only opportunity we have to really kind of hear your voice in responding to the application. I want to share a couple of other things that actually go back to some things that I mentioned here. So one of the common questions we get is about the role that major plays in the admission process. And this is one where I have to give a fairly UCLA specific response to this question, because the answer is really different potentially at each of the 9 campuses. So I'll explain kind of how we do it. And then, you can look into how some of the other campuses do it, which are in some cases similar and in other cases a little bit different. So at UCLA, we offer over 125 majors for students to choose from. You will pick which major you'd like to apply to. If your major is in the College of Letters and Science, which are the vast majority of majors at UCLA, the major you select plays absolutely no role in the freshman admission process. There's no impact, whether you apply undecided, biology, history, business economics, psychology, has absolutely no impact on your likelihood of being admitted. However, if you're applying to one of our specialty schools, engineering, theater, film and television, arts and architecture, music, or nursing, then in addition to the UC application, there is a supplemental application that you have to fill out that goes directly to the faculty in that school. I never see it. It never comes to our office. It doesn't cross our desks. It's not something that we consider in the review process. It's something that's considered by the faculty in those schools. Now, engineering does not have a supplement, but their faculty still play a role in determining who's going to be selected for admission to majors in our Samueli School of Engineering. But the way the process works in general, every freshman application to UCLA is read at least twice before an admission decision is made. And I mean read. The whole thing. We don't cut corners. We don't draw lines. We don't, any student. And I mean, we had last year 139,000 freshmen apply for admission. Every single one of those applications was read at least twice before an admission decision is made. Now, what will happen is if a student is applying to one of those specialty schools that I mentioned, so again, engineering, theater, film and television, arts and architecture, music, or nursing, after we complete the first 2 reviews of the application, we will then, quote, send the application over to that school for the faculty to not only take our kind of holistic evaluation, but combine that with whatever you've submitted as a part of the supplement. So maybe you've done an audition, or you submitted a portfolio, or some additional writing samples, or whatever the case may be, whatever's required for that particular supplement. Ultimately, they then recommend back to us who they want to support for admission. And we send them all. So we don't weed anybody out. Like if, 20,000 students apply to engineering, we're sending 20,000 over. We're not weeding anybody out. Everybody gets sent. Everybody's considered for evaluation by the faculty in those schools. If they recommend you for admission back to my office, then you're likely good to go. We generally sign off on those decisions. There are occasions when we might push back a little bit if we have some academic concerns or something that we're concerned about in the application. But generally, we're going to sign off on those decisions. So if they say yes, you're likely good to go. The flip side of that coin, though, is if they say no, you're done. We do not consider you for a second choice major at my campus. So I say that not to scare anybody off from applying to those majors. In fact, you should apply up front and know whether those majors are going to be a possibility, because the odds are long that you'd be able to switch into any of those majors as a current student. Possibility? Yes, possible. By no means a guarantee. And I really don't want a group of unhappy sophomores who aren't in the major that they really wanted the whole time. So really do some soul searching and know whether one of those majors is really the major for you, and apply for it up front. But know that, that if you're not supported for admission by the faculty in that school, that we're not going to admit you to UCLA. Now, that is the UCLA approach. Other campuses might be very different. Other campuses, major may not play much of a role. Other campuses may consider students for second choice majors and would encourage you to list a second choice major. So this is where you've got to really go onto each of the UC websites or talk to a member of their staff and really understand for the campuses you're interested in what their approach is to major and the role that might play in the admission process. So again, I think we take a lot of pride in the hard work and the long hours that we put into this process. It is very competitive, but I think I would say, as one of the more competitive campuses in the system, I'm proud of the fact that UC has such an incredible experience to offer 1 through 9 for all of these campuses, and that even if things don't work in the freshman process, there is a really viable transfer option for any student who might be interested in pursuing admission at the transfer level. There are actually 6 campuses that offer transfer admission guarantees for students coming out of the California community colleges. So lots of opportunities to access UC either as a freshman or potentially as a transfer student. So with that, I think I am going to invite Brian back on. I'm going to unshare my screen so that you don't have to stare at a big old question slide. And then Brian, I'll turn it over to you and let me know what kind of questions we can answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Just, really great information, straightforward. I think you addressed a lot of questions, even, as or before they came in, but everyone keep your questions coming, because I've had quite a few very good ones, and we'll get as many answers as we can for you. probably unsurprisingly, I'm going to hit it once and then we can move on to others. People want to know a little bit about testing, and it really came down to a couple of different things. One being, if testing used to be important, and you covered this a little bit, what has taken its place? What's more important now because testing wasn't there? And then a second one was people sort of looking for maybe a side door. Does that mean you won't be, if someone got a national merit, finalist or something like that, that's PSAT and its testing. Is that considered? Are there ways to be able to, showcase scholarship eligibility based on a test for someone who has a really high score? Still want you to know, is there any side door for them?
So the short answer to the latter question is no. So we never awarded scholarships for national merit anyway. So that's not something that really has ever been considered or played a role in our process. So, I mean, to the question of like, well, what's taking its place? When you have a holistic process that's considering all of these different factors, there isn't like a vacuum that has to be filled by the absence of testing. I think whenever we were evaluating students for admission before, even with testing was one of 14 different criteria that we considered in an application. So removing that, while I think everybody feels like that's really pulling the rug out from underneath admission offices, testing was really a complementary piece to what we saw over the long term in a student's high school program. Seeing what you've done over 3+ years in high school, and the curriculum and performance and all of that is much more indicative of your success on our campus in your first year than just a test score that you might have taken on a given Saturday. So, I understand that some students feel like testing might have been a strength for them and they wish they had the opportunity to submit that. Unfortunately, the decision was made for it to just be completely test-free and not consider testing, because there's lots of questions about, that students have about, if a school is test optional, do I submit it or not? And how do I know whether my score would be considered a good score at that school or not? And so there are a lot of pitfalls and kind of inequities and some approaches to test optional. So I think we really felt that test-free was the better approach to take. But sometimes I think people wonder, like, well, so does that mean the personal insight questions are more important now, or that the curriculum is more important now? No, I mean, not more important. Those things were always important. Those things always mattered and told us a lot about a student. So that hasn't changed. We're just evaluating all of those things now without an SAT or ACT score next to what we're evaluating. So I would say we haven't kind of replaced that with anything, because we had 13 other elements of comprehensive review that we still feel like gave us a comprehensive look at the student and their ability to be successful on our campus.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. I think a lot of times people, like you mentioned at one point, see, GPA and SAT, and if one of them's gone, then the other is now double importance. But if it's 1 out of 14, that smooths it out a little bit more. It's kind of it was already diluted, and so there's no one big red flag that you should be looking at. So thank you for that. Couple pretty good technical questions about application requirements. If I can hit you with 2 of those at once here, they may be kind of quick answers. One, someone wanted to know if you could give more examples or tell us a little bit more about what is a college prep elective. I know that was on, the A through G requirements there. And then someone else had a really good one about if you're only taking 10th and 11th grade scores as part of the, the UC GPA, what about a, summer term class or something that takes place in between 11th and 12th grade, particularly for 11th graders kind of planning out what they're going to be doing over the, the next 8 months or so? Sure.
So in terms of the electives, it's really anything that is in excess of the requirements in other A through G subject areas would go into that elective box. And it's even broader than that, but that's kind of sometimes a helpful way of understanding kind of what we're looking for there. It's really just that students are taking college prep courses even outside of what the minimum A through G requirements might be. So it's a pretty broad group of classes that will meet that elective requirement. That students never get hung up on that. There's really never an issue of a student not meeting eligibility based on the electives, because they can easily be filled by other A through G courses that might be in excess of what the minimum requirement might have been. The second question that you asked, I think, was about summer classes, and those are incorporated. And I think that was on the slide, but maybe I went through it quickly, that summer classes completed before the start of 10th grade and after the conclusion of junior year still count towards that UC GPA. It's just courses that are in fall of senior year on, and courses that are fall and spring of freshman year do not play a role in the UC GPA. But summer courses completed either before 10th grade or after 11th grade will be part of the UC GPA.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful, and thanks to all of you for asking for those clarifications there. One final clarification on college prep electives. You mean sort of like a fifth English class, a fourth math class, if we were looking at those requirements?
Yeah. It could be that you're taking like an extra lit class, or you're going kind of above and beyond in math, or you're taking a AP geography class or something that there are a whole wide variety of classes will meet those college elective classes. So I would encourage students that, they don't really need to worry about that. If they're pushing in a college prep curriculum, that elective requirement will be easily met in almost every case.
Perfect. And like you said, the goal is not to hit the minimum. If it said recommended on that slide, it's probably a good idea to be pushing toward that and a little bit beyond. So perfect. Those who heeded that advice shouldn't have any problem fulfilling that. Hey, you mentioned toward the end, transfers and the possibility that there are, quite a few transfer opportunities and all those kind of things. We had some good questions about sort of, I'd say, transfer strategy, but you mentioned certain California community colleges have guaranteed placement in there. I think a lot of people wanted to know, say I don't get into my first choice UC campus, is it easier to transfer in from another UC? Is the Cal State system the way in? Is community college the way in? Should I be looking at another good college, maybe in Arizona or Oregon or something like that? Is there anything to that of if you don't get into your top choice, what should you be thinking about for that first year of college?
No, absolutely. And I think this is one of the things, one of many things that makes me really excited to be able to represent UCLA and represent the UC system, because there really is, very viable options in terms of transfer pathways to the University of California. So I will say, as a part of, and if you need some light reading late at night to help you get to sleep, look up California Master Plan. This was written decades ago as kind of the plan for the California Community College, California State University, and UC systems, and how the architects of that plan back then really thought these systems should work together. So when it comes to the transfer process at the University of California, we are squarely committed to California community colleges, and that's written into the master plan, to the point where, like at UCLA, each year of our incoming transfers, and this year I think we enrolled about 3,500 transfer students, 93% of those came from California community colleges. So if you're thinking, if you really are focused on potentially trying to get to your campus of choice through the transfer pathway, then I would really strongly encourage you to consider a California community college, because that's where our priority is. Can you be admitted from another UC? Yes, but as you can see from what I just shared, that's essentially 7% of the students that we're enrolling are from anything other than the California community college system. So that includes Cal States, that includes UCs, that includes other four-year universities, either inside or outside of California. Community colleges are designed to help you transfer. There are resources there that are intended to push you on to the next four-year university, to the four-year university you're going to attend. And especially in California, they know UC, they know these transfer admission agreements or transfer admission guarantees at 6 of the 9 campuses. So not us, not Berkeley, not San Diego, but the other 6 have transfer admission guarantees that you really have an opportunity to work with those, take advantage of those resources, and potentially move on to a UC. When you're at another four-year university, they don't want you to leave. They're not there to help you transfer somewhere else. They want you to stay at that university and complete your degree there, because if you leave, that's a bad data point for that university. That's called attrition. That's people not completing a degree that you brought in potentially as a first-year student. So I think generally I would recommend California community colleges. And when it comes to which community colleges, my advice to students is generally I would say don't drive past one community college to get to another. We don't have any preference of where a student goes to community college. And there are plenty of big community colleges in California that advertise about being, largest public, largest feeders to UC and, down here like USC and places like that. And it's often because they're big, not because there's any preference being given by campuses to those particular community colleges. The one thing of note that I will encourage you all to keep in mind as it relates to transfer admission, for the transfer admission process, and this is true at really any of the UCs, transfer is very major specific. You have to be at junior standing to be able to transfer to my campus. And you have to complete all the major prep associated with whatever major it is that you might be applying to. So it's important that you identify and understand what major you might want to apply to as a transfer student and complete the major prep necessary in those potentially first 2 years, at a community college to make yourself competitive and eligible to be admitted to a UC. For the campuses that have those transfer admission guarantees, they're often for specific majors, and there's a course requirement and a GPA requirement that has to be met to be able to earn that guarantee of admission. So hopefully that's some helpful context around the transfer process.
Yeah, that's really insightful. That 93% statistic. Hopefully, everyone's keeping that in mind. That there sort of is a preferred pathway in, or a most likely pathway in, and that's really, really helpful to know. Speaking of maybe alternative pathways in, and then we'll get back to the front door that everyone's looking for. Can you tell us a little bit about the waitlist process? What should people expect? How likely is it to get in off a waitlist? What should people be thinking about if that comes up? Not that we're all planning on being there, but we've got access to year in November, so we might as well use that to plan a little bit for April and May.
Sure. So the way the wait list works at really any college or university, but I'll focus a little bit on my campus. So when a student applies, you're going to get one of three admission decisions. You're either going to be admitted, you're going to be denied, or you're going to be offered a spot on the wait list. If you're offered a spot on the wait list, you have to opt in by April 15th. So you get your decision late March. It says you've been offered a spot on the wait list. By April 15th, you have to say, yes, I would like to remain on the wait list should space become available. What happens then is after May 1st, for the freshman process, transfer is similar, but just different timeline. After the May 1st commitment deadline, at that point, we assess where we are. And we have enrollment targets each year. We have a certain number of students that the campus wants us to enroll, and different academic schools, California residents, non-residents, there are lots of different kind of enrollment targets that we have within an incoming freshman class. After the May 1st commitment deadline, we then start to assess where are we, and so for our freshman class this year, we enrolled roughly 6,500 or students or so in our freshman class. So if we were to find that after the May 1st deadline, we were a little short of those targets, we would then determine, based upon which of the students that opted into the wait list, which of those students might meet those needs. So let's say, for example, we were short 30 California resident electrical engineers. The only students that we're really going to look at to meet that need are the students that are California residents and in electrical engineering. So I think sometimes you see wait lists that are really big. And I think people are like, well, why do you need so many people on your wait list? Well, out of the gate, half of the students that are offered a spot on the wait list say thanks, but no thanks. They commit to enroll at whatever college or university might have admitted them. So that number immediately gets cut in half. And then for the students that have opted in, we need to be able to meet a whole wide variety of enrollment needs, based on who those students might be. So I don't know after May 1st where we might be short, but I need to have a large enough group of students on the wait list that whatever needs might emerge, we have the ability as a campus to meet those needs. Now, there are some years where we may go to the wait list quite heavily. So summer of 2020 was very active with the wait list. And certainly I think you can all understand that with the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty. Students weren't sure where they were going to go. Fall plans were changing at colleges and universities, remote, fully remote, not remote, residential, not. So there was a lot of movement. So, after that May 1st deadline and leading into the summer, students were changing their minds. They were getting off wait lists at other places or deciding that they were going to enroll somewhere else. So we had to be able to adapt to that, kind of keep up. And so it was a very active waitlist process last summer. This summer, very little waitlist activity because the students that committed to enroll stuck. They did not move. We hit our targets, after that May 1st commitment deadline. So we didn't have much in the way of waitlist activity this summer. So all you can do, the point of all of that is you can't control it. You have no idea what's going to happen. All you can do is opt in. I would encourage you, just as a personal piece of advice, you absolutely should commit to another university by May 1st. And I mean, not just commit in terms of submitting your deposit and securing your space, but really mentally commit to that place, because the odds are good overall in general, and there are exceptional cases and years about this, that you might not get off the wait list. And it's better to really just shift your thinking and say, you know what, I'm going to focus on the places that have admitted me and said they want me in their class out of the gate. I'm excited about these schools, and I'm really going to focus on that. And then if you get a pleasant surprise from a place where you've been waitlisted, then you can make a decision at that point. Okay, do I want to keep this, or do I want to take, this waitlist offer that I've gotten from another college or university? So hopefully that helps a bit.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And one follow-up to that, someone kind of astutely asked, at that point, if you're going to the wait list, do you then consider any grades from 12th grade, any new information, or is it strictly off of the previously submitted application?
No, so when you opt in, and again, this might be a little bit different at each campus, so I'm just speaking for UCLA here. When you opt in, we give students an open text space and an opportunity to update us on senior grades, and to potentially write just a brief narrative. And there's no real specific prompt. It's just kind of open text space, like tell us anything, your interest in UCLA, or an update on what you've been doing in your senior year, like whatever a student wants to share there. My advice when it comes to that is don't leave it blank. And you don't have to give us grades, and there's no, specifics about what you need to share in that space. But I would encourage you, if a college or university gives you some space to write something like that, that you take advantage of it when you opt in, and give us a brief update on something about you, or about your grades, or about what you're doing in your senior year. That will be helpful for us.
Excellent. Thank you. Couple questions about it. So we've got 22 days until 12th grade applications are due. So we've got some folks kind of deep in the weeds there. I'm not sure how much, quote unquote advice you can give on essays, but a couple questions that maybe you can tackle. One is the 350 word count. Is that, I think a lot of us have heard, maybe there's 10% wiggle room to be able to go a little bit over. How closely are you counting words on the word count? Let me take that. That's probably a quick one.
Well, I think it will stop you when you get to a point where it won't allow you to write a 500 word response. So it will limit what you can enter. And to be honest, technically, I don't know what the threshold is, if there is some little wiggle room above the 350. I think we're not counting words here. I think we're doing that because we want students to really get to the point. And I think, to be honest, from a volume standpoint, we've got a lot of applications to read. So I can't read 4 responses that are 1,000+ words in each response. That would be too cumbersome in our process to get done in a timely fashion. I would say bank on 350. I think there is a little bit of wiggle room beyond that, but it's probably minimal. But the application will actually stop you if you get to whatever that limit might be.
So maybe a little frustrating when you see the red bar say too many words, but probably in the end for the best, because you want to make sure the admissions officers will read it. A follow-up question there. I know you mentioned that sometimes the surprising topics or surprisingly mundane topics stand out. To the extent that you can give any advice, and maybe it's not advice as much as examples of things that people might not have thought to write about that ended up being really compelling, or things that people tend to do, or they're kind of common, almost like, common tropes that people think are more impressive or exciting to read than they are. Can you give us any examples of surprising things that go well and surprising things that maybe don't?
So I get this question a lot, and I pretty much never answer it. And here's how I respond to this question. The second that I start to list off examples of things that I thought were effective or students that did a good job in responding to their questions, everybody scribbles down notes and thinks that's the formula. So I've got to come up with something that's just like that. And the answer is there are 101 different ways to write a perfectly helpful personal insight question response. I think students get too caught on what it is that they think we want to hear and don't focus enough on what it is that they want to say. This is really about, if you think about the whole application, you're kind of building a case for your admission, and we're the people that are looking at all the evidence. Think about what you shared in other parts of the app. Okay, we've got your academic history, we've seen your grades and your curriculum. We've seen, any awards or honors or activities or things like that you've been involved in. You're more than that. Like you're more than just the things that fit in those boxes. So what else do you want us to know? What is it about, something that you care about, something that, a view that you have on something that matters to you, some experience that was impactful in your life. I think it needs to be something that really rings through as authentic and something that really is meaningful to you. Because I think at times if students focus too much on trying to produce what colleges are looking for, then they wind up submitting something that is inauthentic. Not, there's no energy in what they write because it feels very formulaic and they're just trying to tell us what we want to hear. And I just have to wonder on the back end of that, if a student doesn't get admitted in a situation like that, then they're left wondering, well, I wonder if I had written about what I thought about, this silly thing or, this view I had on something. Like, I wonder if it would have been different, so don't second guess yourself. Like, just, it's not the topic that really matters. It's how you write about it and the energy you put into it and the reflection that you have in sharing those responses. So I think if I always tell students, the advice I give is, hand the questions to a family member or a friend or a counselor or somebody and have them read the questions out loud to you and then just answer them. Just as if we were sitting here talking and I asked you this question in an interview. That response is really the foundation of what you should be writing, because it's that kind of very natural, authentic, off the top of your head response that I think is going to be the foundation of a really good personal insight question response.
Great, thank you. That's insightful. I think that I like your response to, I can't tell you the topics because you'll try to do that, and that's not you. Is really, really helpful. I think everybody we all want to find what magic phrase we could use to get in, and it's just not about that. And so appreciate that. Hey, two more quick questions. One, I've been meaning I can answer this one, and I've been saving it because you have, there's so many other cool questions out there. A lot of people wanted to know if they get a copy of this or if there's a recording available right at this very link. One of the benefits of us using YouTube Live here is as soon as this program is over, the recording will just live right at this link. So if you want to come back to it, if you found it valuable, and have siblings, cousins, friends, neighbors, anyone who might benefit from it, you can just send them right back to the link you're at right now, and the recording will be here. And then last one for you, Gary. I know there are some amazing UC campuses that hopefully a lot of these folks will have the ability to choose between. There's obviously a pretty beautiful scene of UCLA behind you, but for those who get into multiple UCs, why pick UCLA?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm happy to answer that question. I think my approach and the way that I've always responded to that question is I think it's always great to have choices. And I think when you work hard and you get to a place where you've got a great list of colleges that you've applied to, and you've maybe been admitted to multiple, universities that you've applied to, like, relish that, like be proud of that accomplishment and be proud of the fact that you really work to accomplish that and enjoy the process. This part shouldn't be stressful. I mean, certainly we know, decisions, about where you attend may involve, finances and financial aid and scholarships and all kinds of things, but it should be a fun process. So really be happy with what you've accomplished. UCLA is a place that I think really represents a lot of what I hope a college experience provides to a student. First, we're a very residential campus, and I think that is a fundamental part of a college experience, is that opportunity to live in the residence halls, get to know other students, and be a part of the energy that comes with being in a residential community. And 97% of our freshmen live on campus this year, so we are a place that really is very residential in nature. The academic opportunities at UCLA are really second to none. I think the faculty care, the faculty are committed to engaging with undergraduate students. I think some of our majors are some of the top ranked programs in the country. So certainly quality of education you're going to receive is exceptional. But the faculty want you in their labs. The faculty are eating in the dining halls on campus, and they're engaging with students. And I think at a big public university, sometimes that might not be the perception. You know, it might be easy to think I'm just a number and I'm just a person shuffling in the crowd, but the students connect with our faculty. And I think that's impressive, considering that these are really some of the best and brightest faculty in the world that really are committed to teaching undergraduate students. I love Westwood. I mean, I love our location. I love the village that's just south of campus. I think students can walk to great coffee shops and restaurants and things that are close by to campus. I love the Bruin spirit. You know, we're a place that has a strong athletics tradition, and it's a lot of fun to go out to either Pauley Pavilion or the Rose Bowl and kind of support the Bruins and whatever the particular sport might be. So it's a place that I think is really special. I mean, the list of alums from UCLA are incredible. And I think all of those folks really look back on their experience with great fondness. So I love it. I'd be happy to trade in the traffic around it, but otherwise, the campus itself and the faculty and the students that make up this community are truly special. So I've been here, like I said, about 9 years and wouldn't trade it for anything. So I've been happy to be here. So thanks for the question.
Excellent. Well, thank you for such an enthusiastic answer. For all those considering any of the UCs are amazing campuses, UCLA, as you can see from the photo behind you, everything else is a gorgeous place. And obviously it's just really prestigious and great education. So thank you so much, Gary, for just such good information, candidness. Hopefully everyone out here found it really helpful. And if you need a little more assistance, I know one thing that I always found kind of surprising was admissions officers want to hear from you if you have questions. They want to make the process easy and transparent. So I know there are a lot of questions coming in that we either didn't get to or people didn't have a chance to ask because they weren't sure how to articulate them. You can contact UCLA admissions, contact Varsity Tutors. And if you did find anything particularly valuable here, I want to leave everyone with this last slide here to be able to share with your social networks what you learned for an opportunity to win a free tutoring session with Varsity Tutors. So we'll thank everyone for all their questions. Thank you, Gary, for your time, and hopefully everyone has a great evening. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good night.